What if the man who gave the world the iPhone was once kicked out of his own company? What if the billionaire who inspired a generation once lived on the floor, ate free meals at temples, and survived by collecting Coke bottles for spare change? This is not just a story about Apple. It's the raw, emotional journey of a man who faced rejection, betrayal, and heartbreak, yet never stopped believing in his vision. This is the story of Steve Jobs. Steve was born in San Francisco in 1955 to an unmarried college student. Unable to raise him, she put him up for adoption. A working-class couple, Paul and Clara Jobs, took him in and promised to send him to college one day. Even as a child, Steve was different. He was intensely curious, deeply stubborn, and not afraid to question authority. In school, he was seen as a troublemaker, bored by rules and unimpressed by structure. But under that rebellious attitude was a mind that worked differently, a mind that would one day revolutionize technology. He made it to college, Reed College in Oregon, but dropped out after just one semester. Not because he didn't care, but because he felt guilty about his adoptive parents spending their life savings on something that didn't inspire him. He stayed on campus, unofficially auditing classes that interested him, including calligraphy, which would later influence Apple's design aesthetic. During that time, he had no dorm room, slept on the floors of friends' rooms, and returned Coke bottles to get enough money to buy food. Every Sunday, he walked 7 miles across town just to get one free meal at the Hare Krishna temple. He would later reflect on this period as the foundation of his belief that life connects in strange, unpredictable ways. He said, "You have to trust in something: your gut, destiny, life, karma. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart." After college, he traveled to India in search of spiritual enlightenment, shaved his head, experimented with psychedelics, and embraced minimalism. He returned more focused but still restless. That's when his old friend from high school, Steve Wozniak, showed him a circuit board he'd been working on. Jobs immediately saw potential. Not just in the product, but in the idea of making computers personal, simple, and accessible. In 1976, in the garage of his parents' house, Jobs and Wozniak founded Apple. To fund the operation, Woz sold his HP calculator and Jobs sold his Volkswagen van. Their first product, the Apple I, was modest, but it caught the attention of a few investors. They reinvested everything into the Apple II, which became a massive success and helped launch the personal computer revolution. At just 25, Steve Jobs was worth over $100 million. But instead of slowing down, he became more obsessed with design, with perfection, with pushing boundaries. He believed that good wasn't good enough, that technology should be beautiful, intuitive, and almost magical. But Steve's intensity came at a cost. He was known to be temperamental, demanding, and difficult to work with. Employees admired his vision but feared his wrath. He pushed people beyond their limits, often bordering on cruelty. Behind the scenes, Apple's board began to grow concerned. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh. It was a revolutionary product, but it didn't sell well initially. Steve's leadership was questioned. A power struggle ensued. The board sided with then-CEO John Sculley, and in a move that shocked the world, Steve Jobs, the founder, was forced out of the very company he created. He was just 30, rich, famous, and fired. It was the darkest period of his life. He later admitted, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." But at the time, it was devastating. Everything he had built, everything he had poured himself into was taken away. He felt humiliated, betrayed, lost. But he didn't quit. Instead of disappearing, he started again. He founded a new company called Next, which aimed to build the most powerful and beautiful computer the world had ever seen. It was expensive, niche, and not a commercial success, but it was ahead of its time in ways the world would later appreciate. At the same time, Steve bought a small computer graphics division from George Lucas. That company was renamed Pixar. For years, Pixar struggled to stay afloat, but Jobs believed in the potential of computer animation. His gamble paid off in 1995 when Pixar released Toy Story, the first full-length computer-animated film. It was a massive hit. Suddenly, Steve Jobs was back on top, but not in tech. He was now a Hollywood player. Meanwhile, back at Apple, things were falling apart. The company was bleeding money, losing relevance, and falling far behind Microsoft and other competitors. In 1996, desperate for innovation, Apple acquired Next, and with it, Steve Jobs returned. But this was not the same Steve Jobs. He was older, wiser, and more focused. He took control, slashed unprofitable projects, simplified the product line, and rebuilt the team. He brought with him not just technical insight but a new philosophy: simplicity, elegance, and an obsession with customer experience. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod. It changed how the world listened to music. In 2007 came the iPhone. And with it, Apple didn't just launch a phone, it launched the modern smartphone era. Each of these breakthroughs was built on decades of pain, failure, rejection, and relentless perseverance. Despite his successes, Steve's health began to decline. In 2003, he was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. He delayed treatment, hoping for a natural cure. Eventually, he underwent surgery, but the disease kept returning. Even as his body weakened, he kept working. He unveiled the iPad in 2010 and made surprise appearances at Apple events, visibly frail but mentally sharp. In his final years, he focused on legacy. He handpicked Tim Cook as his successor, shared lessons with his biographer Walter Isaacson, and worked tirelessly on Apple's new headquarters. Apple Park. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned the loss of a genius. Tributes poured in, not just from the tech industry, but from artists, designers, entrepreneurs, and everyday people who had been touched by his products, his vision, and his story. Steve Jobs didn't have a perfect life. He made mistakes. He hurt people. He was flawed, complicated, and often misunderstood. But what made his story powerful wasn't just the innovation. It was the struggle. He was rejected by his birth parents. He was fired from his own company. He faced death with courage. And through it all, he never stopped believing that he could change the world. He, once, said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. There is no reason not to follow your heart." Steve Jobs didn't just follow his heart, he led millions to believe in the impossible, and that is the legacy he left behind.